this video, I'm going to show you 11 very important tips and tricks when painting a polymer clay figurine to help you avoid any pitfalls and make your sculpt look more professional. I drew a character design of the Mad Hatter and sculpted him using Sculpey medium firm polymer clay. He's been baked and is now ready for paint. My first tip is on painting skin. I started out painting my sculpt using folk art acrylics, but I was just seeing so many brushstrokes that I decided to remove it all with alcohol and repaint his skin with Vallejo model paints. They have a series of skin tone paints, so I decided to use their light flesh tone color to start. Model and army paints are made specifically for painting models, so they tend to be a little thinner than regular acrylic paint, which means you get less brushstrokes. But if you can, I do highly recommend airbrushing the skin. You'll get a super even coat with no brush strokes, and it takes way less time because you'll only need 1 or 2 coats, unlike even with the model paints, it could take up to 4 coats if you're not using a primer. There is a bit of a learning curve with airbrushing, but trust me, it's really worth it to save time and get a quality, professional look. My second tip is to use a color palette from the same brand. As long as you're using good color theory, using colors from either the same series or by the same brand will help ensure your colors harmonize well together. If you do need to mix brands though, just make sure the colors coordinate enough by referencing color theory. And trust your judgment. If it looks right, it probably is. Tip number 3 is to use slow dry fluid to make brush strokes disappear. You only need a tiny amount, maybe 10 to 20% mixed with your paint. Just don't overwork it or it can start tearing the paint and that becomes a nightmare to fix. Once you get it smooth, just leave it to dry. My fourth tip is to get some quality filbert brushes. They've got a flat oval shape which is super versatile and can be used for anything from getting close to and even lining an edge to filling in most medium-sized areas without having to switch brushes. As much as I love my filbert brushes, some areas are just going to require a liner brush, and I recommend hoarding as many as you can, because if you're anything like me, there are days when you forget to take your brushes out from the water jar and they end up bent out of shape, or worse, you've left them out to dry without cleaning them and you find them encrusted with dried up acrylic, so having a lot of extra liner brushes around is definitely a time saver. When I first baked the Mad Hatter, he had a few cracks, one in the elbow and one in the neck. Not gonna lie, it's absolutely awful when your sculpt cracks during baking, and especially when you're new to polymer clay, it will make you want to cry and then throw your piece out the window. But there is a solution if this has happened to you, which brings us to tip number 6. Use epoxy sculpt to fill in cracks and sand before painting. Epoxy Sculpt by Avis is a 2-part epoxy modeling compound you can buy online or at some craft stores. They come in different colors, and once you've mixed parts A and B, you get about 1 to 3 hours of working time to either sculpt with it or use it to repair any cracks. It cures rock hard in about 24 hours. I recommend using wet dry sandpaper to avoid getting dust in the air. Then you can paint over it and it will blend right in with the rest of your sculpt. Tip number 7 is when painting metallic colors, don't do as I'm doing here and paint it straight onto the clay. I think I got away with this because I did several layers and it's a small area, but it's really best to prime your clay with black acrylic paint first. That will make your gold, silver, and copper colors truly pop out. My 8th tip is to use a dotting tool or fine liner to make circles and spots. The dotting tool can be a little tricky and it might take some practice to get the paint to the right consistency. You want it thin but not runny. Just thick enough to stick to the dotting tool. They're usually great for small dots like a pupil. For larger spots, you'll have better control using a fine liner. Sometimes I'll try to use a fine dotting tool as a liner when I don't want any rogue hairs on my liner brush to get in the way and I need absolute precision, but the paint just kept sticking to the metal end instead of going onto the mug, so I switched to a fine liner brush, which worked much better. Tip number number 9 is that UV resin isn't just for nails and jewelry. This magical product has a ton of uses with polymer clay, and I encourage you to play around and see what fun effects you can come up with. For the Mad Hatter, I tinted some white UV resin with a tiny amount of brown alcohol ink and cured it layer by layer into the cup. If you don't have resin, a great alternative is DecoArt's Triple Thick Gloss Glaze. It gives a high gloss shine and adds some depth. It just takes longer to dry at 24 hours. My 10th tip is about dry brushing. The technique is simple. You just load up a dry brush with paint, brush off all the extra paint onto a paper towel, then stipple or crisscross your brush onto the surface. I used this on the hat to make a cloudy gold effect, but it's perfect for making textures in clay like fabric, wood, or hair really pop out. My final tip is to use India or pigment-based archival ink pens for drawing fine lines. If you're using a technical pen as I'm doing here, wait 24 hours for it to dry before varnishing, otherwise it will smear. There are several great products out there, but I'd recommend Pitt, Sharpie, Micron, or acrylic gel pens. Acrylic markers work too, though they tend to have a thicker line. I hope these tips helped you learn something new about painting your polymer clay character sculpts. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. And of course, if you like this video, please like and subscribe and check out my other pop sculpture videos. I'm just getting started with this series, but I've got a lot more in the works, so please stay tuned. Till the next video, happy sculpting!